I could go on and on. I think you got the idea. It's just, we communicate. We talk about what's going to be best for the whole group. I have my own private place. I've got to tell you the truth. It is in my nature that I need solitude. I used to just run away from things. I need solitude. So I built me a place of solitude. And the deal is, if that door is closed, I don't care if the house is on fire, don't bother me. Leave it to me to smell the smoke. Okay? Because I get into certain states of consciousness in there that a knock on the door will hurt me for a little while. It'll shock me, and I don't like that. And I assume you're going to do the same thing, so I'll grant you the same privilege. Chores get discussed. There are chores in any house. I'll take on the middle of the night run. Because I can see in the dark. They have to believe that to be comfortable. I live in a matriarchy. I wouldn't have it any other way. But I have certain duties there. In our neighborhood one time, there was a brutal murder committed just a couple blocks away. A whole family was wiped out. They still haven't found out who it is. Terrified my girls and my wife. It did not make me that comfortable either. But they were terrified. And just having me get up in the middle of the night was no longer enough. They needed something. So we discussed that. How are we going to react if we hear noises here? And guns are out of the question in my house. It's illegal for me to own one. I'm a convicted felon. And I don't like guns around where there's kids. And I wouldn't shoot anybody anyway. And I know they wouldn't shoot anybody, so that's out. So what are we going to do? Well, we all have baseball bats under the bed. There's child size and there's adult size baseball bats. We had a little training session, because I know damn good and well these kids aren't going to hit anybody in the head. I wouldn't. So what I've told them is, if you hear the noise, let me deal with it first. Then if you don't get some response out of me and you still hear the noise, get your ball bat, and anything that walks in the room, hit it in the kneecap and run. They won't do that either, but they think they will. Okay? So they're comfortable with it. And I'm comfortable with it. And it also means that after a couple minutes of noises in the house, I make a noise, because they just might hit the next thing that moves. We communicate about all that stuff. When my daughter began dating, she brought Eddie Haskell home. You haven't lived until you've had Eddie Haskell dating your daughter. And she asked me what I thought, and I told her. Oh, not him, Dad. Well, it wasn't that long since she understood. And so the next boyfriend, she came to me first, and she said, I'm bringing him over tonight. Case him for me, will you? Tell me what you think. We communicate. Those are our affairs. We don't smoke in our house by good conscience. None of us smoke. Now, we don't want to live with it either. After you've gone, we don't be bothered with it. So we just don't smoke in our house. And the girls thought, well, but we have friends who smoke. We need to have a place for them. Well, there's outside. But sometimes it's cold, Dan. Well, we have the garage then. So they made a sign for you smokers that goes over the garage door that says smoking room. We communicate, and we try to think of how's this going to affect other people. Okay? There's hundreds of those kinds of examples, and I'm sure you live them. They just all fit. They keep us unified. Their father is a former Denver vice detective. Their real father. It's been very important for me over the years to never say anything about him, period, particularly negative stuff. And he's not always been one of my favorite people. But to keep my family unified, I must not create more disunity as they work out their deal with their dad. That's between them. 3 weeks ago, he and I had breakfast. He's delightful. He's charming. He's retired, and he's on Prozac, and he's fun. But what's going to keep the family intact? My daughter just moved back in with us with her 2 babies because the man she's currently married to is a bit abusive and he got out of hand. It was necessary. She had no question at all that she could come to us because we've worked hard to preserve unity. It's time for them to go. But they will always be welcome, and they know that. And that comes from a lot of work, from the application of this principle of unity. You want to be a member of our family? Come to dinner. You want to stay for a few days? Our group conscience says you can stay for 3. If you're blood kin, you get 5. Okay. Then we have another group conscience. Drunks do not detox in our house. But they're more than welcome all the time, day and night, but they don't get to sleep there. This is not a crisis center or a detox center. That's the conscience that preserves the unity. Dad will be gone a lot, okay? This comes first. My family knows that. They also know because this comes first does not mean they come second. I don't know how to explain that to you, but they all understand that. It has to do with the quality of your time. When I'm home, I'm all the way home. When I'm here, I'm all the way here. And that seems to be part of that. They know you all, because when I sponsor you, the deal is you have to come to my house. I want you to see how a recovered alcoholic and his family lives. How do we interact with each other? And my daughter gave us a great lesson one time when I had a real psychopath on the couch. And we do it downstairs first, so everybody gets to know each other. She came down the stairs and she said, "Excuse me," which was an interruption of a life and death mission here. Why, what? She said, "Excuse me, I live here too, you know, and you've never introduced me to this person." Okay? So, how do you preserve unity? Courtesy. The spiritual life, as I understand it, is about good manners as much as anything else. So anyway, that's how this applies in the home and hundreds of other things. My neighbors know I'm in AA simply because we have AA meetings in the backyard sometimes. And one day his kid came over to me and said, "You seem to know something about alcoholism. You've been listening at the fence." I've got some friends who may need some help. This is the one that was growing marijuana in my backyard. Well, he didn't think an old fart like me would know what that was. It used to be my business. So I pulled his plants up. I didn't say anything about it, just pulled the plants up. They're weeds. I weeded my yard. And we had a big black lab. And he slipped up on me about a week later when he discovered the plants were gone. He was getting ready to redo them, I'm sure. He said, "Mr. Priss, do you think that dog would bite me if I came over in your yard?" I said, "No, Chris, I don't. I think what he'd probably do is eat you and then bury your bones under the apple tree." It's easier than talking about marijuana with him. I don't want to go on and on, but you can go on and on. This one is so critical. This is the one where I'm weak at all times and need to really think about what are my affairs. There's no Jesuit priest from India, because we're concerned about selfishness and self-centeredness, and he cleared it up for me. It is not selfish for me to want to live my life so that it suits me. What's selfish is for me to expect you to live your life so it suits me, which is consistent with this tradition. My own affairs are my own affairs, but if they will affect you, I need to secure your consent or at least your input. That's enough.
Okay, Tradition 5. Each Alcoholics Anonymous group ought to be a spiritual entity having but one primary purpose, that of carrying its message to the alcoholic who still suffers. I've always thought that the spiritual entity side of this thing was apropos. I was sobered up in the one meeting a week, little hick town in Wyoming, and the group was 168-hour-a-week operation. The people were available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. They only had one meeting, but the meeting was such a small part of what they did as a group that, and I wonder sometimes if maybe that focus hasn't changed. That if you know, when I was delegate, I got to go around and ask groups how they're doing, and they would the almost universal response to how a group is doing is how many meetings a week they have, how much money they got in the bank, or how many members they got. Almost universal. Well, you know, I don't know that that's really, but that's obviously not the question I was asking, but that's the response I got. And I think some of it has to do with the fact that we've gotten maybe in some cases away from having a primary purpose or having one primary purpose, and all these secondary purposes have somehow overwhelmed the primary purpose. And there's always going to be, I guess, and always has been, probably always will be, that school of thought in AA that says this way of living has its advantages for all, and we're going to include everybody in our deal, everybody. Regardless of what your malady is, regardless of what your problem is, regardless of if you're just... I've had people sit in the meetings and say, I have a desire to stop drinking, they never drank, or I have a problem with alcoholism because what's her name is a drunk, or what's his name is a drunk. You know, I don't even know how to respond to that most of the time. With that deer in the headlight look, mostly. The little group that I belong to now is very much akin to that kind of operation that I was used to. This group is very active down at a little spin dry outfit that we have right down the street from where the group meets. And the group is in the business of helping one another, and they do that. And they believe in sponsorship. They believe in you know, the quality of the meeting being a good deal, and I really enjoy it. I really like the group, and I like the spirit that pervades that group. They're not particularly involved in the service structure. It's a failing. I'm working on it. But that aside, I really like the group. Compadre?
I've got a little different take on our program has its advantages for everybody. I think it's to everybody's advantage that I'm sober. Doesn't matter how you behave. But yeah, there's no doubt about that. So what is a group's message? We know what the basic AA message is. We don't even have to deal with that. And it gets carried in a lot of different ways. Well, what's my group's message? Because my group has a message, if it's a real group. Part of the message my group has is that we will be there when we say we will be there, as a group. We've proven that by putting it in a directory so that anybody knows where we are and when we're going to be there, and we will be there. That's a very important thing for me personally, too. That works at home, too. My wife is very frightened of heights, and I fly all the time. And I know it makes her nervous. I just know it. So I make sure she has my schedule. But we both are realists. Just because it says United's going to land at Denver at 5:05 doesn't mean that's when we're actually going to get there. The first thing I do, because it runs all the way through when I get off an airplane, is call her and tell her I'm on the ground now. The danger begins. But she knows the part that she's concerned about is over. I'm here. I'm in town. I'm safe to this point anyway. And she knows approximately how long it takes me to get from where I call her to home. And so we have a comfort. We've got to consider each other that way. My group's message is the same one. We care whether you show up or not. Okay. It makes a difference. Part of our message is you're welcome. We want you to know that. Like that kid that brought us awake that time because he said we weren't carrying the message anywhere. It got us involved in carrying the message. And we did that in an interesting way. Remember the old detox down on Larimer Street? They'd have all the groups come in, and what they were doing was carrying a speaker meeting in. Well, our group wasn't a speaker meeting. Ours was a big book meeting. We read out of the big book and discussed steps. So we took our meeting down there when it was our turn. We didn't have a speaker meeting. We did what we do. That was our group's message. So if any of those guys wanted to come to that kind of AA, now they knew where it was. That was our message. Part of our group's message is that we tend to stay sober. Relapse is not a necessary part of our recovery. There are some of us that drink again, but not very many. Not very many. Part of our message as a group, both my AA group and my family, is to get ready to have some fun. We understand clearly this is only life or death. It's nothing to get too serious about. Okay? We're going to have some fun. As a group, we do things outside. We don't join the softball league, but I bet there's some members of our group will be playing softball. I don't know who they would be, but I bet there are. We have no problem with that. We do some things. We used to have a traveling monthly potluck meeting as a group. One month it's my turn in my backyard. Next month it's Tom's turn in his backyard. Next time it's your turn in your backyard. And that was a lot of fun. We all think it was a wonderful thing. It died because we're all lazy. The guy that was doing it, coordinating it all, drank again. Nobody picked up the ball. So one of the messages our little group has is that we're not always reliable. Okay. But we'll always talk about it. We have a message we must carry to our community. I do a lot of work in corrections, and there was a period of time when the meeting at the Denver County Jail was canceled, and they would not let us back in. So I went to Captain Levis to find out why, and he said, well, let me tell you why. The night you have a meeting, we go through some extra stuff here. I've got to have a couple extra guards. We've got to move people from the dormitories to the meeting room and back. There are problems that we have here, and about half the time you guys don't show up. So we're just not going to have it at all. Yeah, that was a shocker. About half the time you guys don't show up. So what we did was form a little meeting. We guaranteed him, at his request, if you'll get me 5 people, the same 5 people, who will commit to be here once a week for the next 6 months, we'll let you have a meeting. The first time all 5 of them don't show up, it's over. And out of that developed the thing that we had going back in early 80s, teams of people, coordinated by one person would send it, this team would go to Canyon this week and then this week, and it really worked. It got everybody involved. It was based on one of our weaknesses. Half the time you guys don't show up. So our group's message is we will, always. And that's taken on some real things. There's people who've gotten to meetings in blizzards and riots and all kinds of stuff, but we'll be there if we say we're going to be there. My dad gave me a piece of wisdom to cover that one too. He said all you need is to live a good life is 2 things, honor and wisdom. You must have enough honor to keep every promise you ever make, no matter what the personal consequences. And enough wisdom not to make too many promises like that.
Don't ever want to be a hypocrite, do you? Questions on this?
Dave, alcoholic, June 2nd, 1987. It's always been my understanding and teachings that, this particular tradition always revolved around the singleness of purpose. And I think that one of my biggest concerns in Alcoholics Anonymous now is because I was brought up in the old school by the old-timers that just put it this way, when I was about a week sober, I was walking around Alcoholics Anonymous talking about I was an alcoholic addict, and there was a kind old-timer in Long Beach, California, who I couldn't stand at the time, who had about 27 years of sobriety at that time, who, kindly pointed out to me after I had shared in a meeting and pulled me to the side and explained to me about the fact that, if I was an addict, I could go somewhere else. There were other meetings that I could go to. And that if I was an alcoholic, this is what our primary purpose here is, to deal with Alcoholics Anonymous, And it's funny because 1995, as I'm sitting in San Diego at the World Convention of Alcoholics Anonymous, I'm listening to another old-timer talk about the traditions of Alcoholics Anonymous and literally talking about the same thing. And I guess what my big confusion is I go to meetings now, and some of them are closed, and people that are not identifying as alcoholic are sharing. And I don't know how to deal with that, because I feel like standing up and screaming and yelling, and I have. And I don't know how to maintain my composure to that. And I'd like to get the experience, of how to deal with the singleness of purpose and how to keep Alcoholics Anonymous pure, because I learned through my experience that after looking over my alcoholism, through doing the steps, that I am an alcoholic and I suffer from the disease of alcoholism, and the people that I relate to are alcoholics, and the people that share their experience with me that have helped me through my course of my sobriety have suffered from the disease of alcoholism. So, I don't know if is that a good question? Did I state my question?
I think I'm a juicer. That's my deal. I'm an alcoholic. I did just about enough dope to screw up my drinking, and I didn't like it. I'm not a dope dealer. Okay, I didn't see any. What I had was doing the job, and I was drinking both fists. So this thing was tailor-made for me. I was one of the ones that came in. I had very few related disorders. My life was bone simple. Drink, live. That's it. That's all it was. So I came pretty unencumbered. This thing was tailor-made for me. That's not universally true. The best I can do, the best I can hope for, is eat, sleep, live these principles. Be the best example that I can be as an Alcoholics Anonymous member, and I'm naturally going to attract alcoholics. That's who I'm going to attract in my life, just by and through my story. Not too many people got my story. That's fine. But I seem to never run out of people wherever I go. I don't know how, short of going back to the old sniffing 12-step, figure out who you are, what you are, kind of committees that we used to have in order to get into this thing. And where did sponsor come from? In order to find and get into Alcoholics Anonymous, you had to be sponsored in because it was an invisible society. That's where it came from. You had to know somebody. And they would check you out pretty good. They'd look at your resume. They'd go down and talk to the cops. They'd find out your story, see, if you were incapable of telling it. They'd go ask your wife. God forbid that had ever happened. And so you were 12-stepped into Alcoholics Anonymous. And there's some groups around the state that they've got screening committees. Figure out who's coming. They're worried about who's coming. I believe that what we have done is our own doing. I don't buy that it's because of these no good new ones. I think it's our own doing. I think the AA members got lazy. I think we got so happy with, they're bringing them in. We could just sit in our comfortable little chairs and smoke our comfortable cigarettes and get real comfortable in Alcoholics Anonymous, and they're just bringing them to us. And so I think we forgot how to do 12-step. And it wasn't until my life got in a situation where there was no AA and I was forced to do these things that I realized, these simple little things that they used to do they've done for 65 years now, they work pretty good. Why do we get away from that? Why do we do these other things? I have to be the one sometimes in the group that's willing to stick my neck out and get it chopped off. Okay, and I'm not real eloquent sometimes. Where's AA? It's not always good openers. And I can't do anything about who's coming. We've got a lot of friends of Alcoholics Anonymous who are saying, you're an alcoholic, go to AA. You're an addict, go to AA, but just tell them you're an alcoholic. We can't do anything about that except do our CPC work and say, look, send your addicts to Narcotics Anonymous, and then have those opportunities available. We say to people, you're not an alcoholic, you have to leave the meeting. And sometimes they go out and nobody goes with them. And you ask them why can't we get 2 people to go? Because I'll miss my meeting. Well, that don't hold any water with me, so that's sometimes the best meeting, the one out there. See? So we do it to ourselves. We do it to ourselves. And I just am not one of these that buys that it's all because of this outside influence. Most of the people that I've talked to that had any degree of credibility in my life have always said to me that Alcoholics Anonymous will destroy itself from within, not from without. It does not matter who's coming. We have an obligation, I think, as Don said earlier, we're going to find out if you're an alcoholic or not. And we're going to find out in the simple, easy ways. When you're about 5, 6, 7, 8 days sober, we're going to take in a 12-step call. First of all, we're going to see if you're willing. And if you're not, there's probably a better than even chance you're not going to make it. And we're not going to let you say anything. That was my experience. 10 days sober, they took me to my first 12-step call as an observer. And I got to clean up. And I pointed out to those guys after about a third one of these, I said, you guys aren't doing very good. Nobody's gotten into the group yet. In fact, the last guy kicked us out by throwing an ashtray at us. And some very prophetic words were said to me. He said, if it's his day, there's nothing we can say that's going to keep him out. And if it ain't his day, there's nothing we can say that's going to get him in. The important thing is that we're willing to present our case. That's the important.
When AA found me, I was certified as a sociopath type 2, a psychopath, and a manic depressive drug addict. Had no clue that I was alcoholic. My alcoholism was hidden behind all that, the drama. So what they did for me, my sponsors, after talking with me just a little while, said, we don't think you're a manic depressive or a drug addict, or we think you're a good actor. Then they very carefully helped me find out whether I was alcoholic or not. The idea is I can't help you find out anything else about you, but I can help you determine if you're an alcoholic or not. And if you are, I don't care if you have 50 other related disorders, you belong here. Just don't talk about them in meetings. Okay. If you're not, let me get you somewhere where you can get some help, because we'll kill you. We'll kill you. So that was kind of the basis of the whole thing. And in my group and my life, that's what we do first, is spend some time finding out, are you alcoholic or not? A few years back, we ran into the problem as more and more non-alcoholics, particularly cocaine addicts, began to show up. How are we going to sort this out? And what they were saying was true. We don't like to go to the NA and the CA meetings because there's not enough strength there. This is where the strength is in AA. So a group of us decided, let's see what we can do about that. And we, one-on-one, began to sponsor the cocaine and the narcotics addicts through the steps. They had awakenings, just as that's what it'll happen. And they began to get stronger and stronger, and now they don't come anymore. They've got their own thing, and it's really strong. The benefit to us is when somebody does show up now, I'm no longer threatened. I get ranting and raving because I'm threatened. I'm no longer threatened. I can say, oh, I know who to take you to. We've got a name and a place and a phone number. I can hand carry you if you really don't belong here. Let me help you find out. But if you don't, let's get you some real help. Whoever God sends to me, I believe God sent to me, and I'm supposed to do something with them. But it doesn't mean I'm supposed to be the one that does it. I may just be the conduit. I'm a very strong believer in singleness of purpose, and I am one of those. I'm not a drug addict, but I did speed for 14 years and acid. I always had control of it. I've gotten clear, and I'm not an addict, but I was a junkie. There's a difference. I quit the drugs without any effort. It's the alcohol that couldn't stop me. So one of my messages to people is let's find out what you really are. Because the steps will work for anybody once the foundation is truth, but they won't work at all if they're based on sand and lies. So it gets back to the basic thing, one-on-one, face-to-face, let's talk about it. One of the groups that what we did, because in the format, in order to give it was a call-up meeting, and to give the chairperson some guidance, because it was a closed meeting, if someone said, I'm just an addict, our chairperson is in jeopardy now. What do they say? They can't stay. But we don't want to be crude if they get out of here. So we actually wrote it down. We asked them, do you have a problem with alcohol that you want to do something about? No. Then 5 or 6 of our people will go with you into another room and have a separate meeting. You came for a meeting, you'll get one. But they can't stay in the main meeting. And I thought it took us 4 group consciousness to come up with that, but it seemed to be a more loving way than just get the hell out of here. I work in the business. I work in corrections, and my job is to create arenas. I work with a treatment unit inside a correctional facility. And our primary purpose is to sort them out before they get to you. We got them for 42 days, we'll sort them out. Okay. But what we ask of you is that on a regular basis, you come in and talk with them so that they have some connections when we turn them loose. Chuck's been down there. It's a wild group. Mm-hmm. And what we are finding is that 90% of them come to us as cocaine addicts, and within 42 days, over half of them have discovered they really are alcoholics. The other half really are cocaine addicts, so we send them to CA. But I used to be threatened. Those are just some of the solutions we've come up to with this. We are living now in a day and age where almost everybody's had some kind of drug experience, but just taking drugs doesn't make you a drug addict any more than drinking makes you an alcoholic. But I don't want to hear about it at the meeting. You want to talk war stories? I got some speed stories that'll curl your hair. If that's what you have to have, let's go have coffee. Okay? I'm one of the lunatics, but I don't talk about that in AA because it has no place here. And it's not going to get any better until we help them get stronger. And that's what Bill suggested we do. He said, if NA or one of the others doesn't exist in your community, help them get it started. Go to their meetings for a while. Help them get strong, because they're first cousins. We can't make AA members out of non-alcoholics, but these folks are our first cousins. And so that picture carried for me. AA is a big family. But as in any family, there's immediate family and there's kissing cousins. And I like my kissing cousins, but I want to hang out with my immediate family. The ones who really do understand me. These folks think I'm cute and weird. These folks understand me. Anyhow, those are just images. I hope it helps a little bit. We got a task to do, and we need to do it lovingly.
We probably ought to not get married to our first cousins either.
Why not?
Yeah, alcoholic named Jim, and November 3rd, 91. And this one kind of incident I observed about a year and a half ago. I was taking a evening course. It was a psychology course at a community college in Boulder, and the topic of alcoholism came up, and Alcoholics Anonymous. I didn't feel at the time the setting was appropriate for me to break my anonymity. But one of the people in the class, they said either they for some reason they'd gone to an AA meeting, I think as a result of a DUI or whatever. And this person, I think a couple other people in the class had a similar experience of saying in this group of people, it's a bunch of crap. There's a bunch of people sitting around and talking about how much their lives suck or complaining about this, that, or the other thing. And one of the things I was really struck in that comes back to primary purpose is that when I'm in an AA meeting, I don't know what everybody's there for. Making sure that when I'm talking about, it's staying on focus of this is the solution to alcoholism. I know what it is. I know what it feels like to be restless, irritable, and discontented. What I want to find out, by coming to AA, is how do I not feel that way? And if somebody's coming in, walk into a first meeting, like this is their first ever image of Alcoholics Anonymous, and they see a bunch of people sitting around talking about how depressed they are, or what their psychologist told them, or any of that other crap, that not only are they not getting the message, of recovery from alcoholism, they also go to whoever else they know and say, don't waste your time. And maybe later on when we get into attraction rather than promotion, that also impacts on that. But just as throw that out there, just as kind of on this topic. So thank you.
I'm personally responsible for that. Go ahead, Tom. I cannot change what's going on in any group, nor am I supposed to. I'm only there to speak my truth, and I tend to agree with you. My God, I've been to meetings in the last few years where if I were new, I'd have never come back. Never. But I'm not new. So I'll keep... My sponsor was so clear with that, he said, it doesn't matter what anybody else is doing. What are you doing? I have that responsibility. And that's all I have. Tom?
Yeah, I'm Tom Ewell, alcoholic. Got sober on June the 15th of 1986. Been continuously sober and haven't taken any mood-altering stuff since that time. And this is not to whip a dead horse, but this guy's point is so important, I think. And I'm going to reiterate some of the things that you said. A lot of time, what happened to me was in the course of my drinking, I tried to get away from the booze in various different ways. And some of them that aren't listed in the big book, and one of them was the heroin cure, and it didn't work, but it turned me into it never separated me from booze, but it turned me into a heroin addict. And for 10 years I was a hope-to-die heroin addict, and when I first got to AA, I came in through a treatment center, and I used to say I'm an alcoholic and an addict until, through good direction, I was, the fifth tradition was explained to me, and I stopped doing that. And so I'm in a unique position that when I stand up for this tradition, and then people say, oh, well, you hate addicts or you're against them, I say, how can I be? I are one. I know what selling your ass for dope is. And I know the difference between alcoholism and heroin addiction or any kind of drug addiction. But what people say to me constantly, and I think this is the reason I stood up here, is because I think this is so important to understand this. They say, well, we're supposed to be loving and tolerant. And if you were loving and tolerant, you wouldn't stop an addict in mid-sentence like you do at these meetings. And I say, au contraire, I think it's loving and tolerant to do what I'm doing. And I think that, it's like Gary said, we've allowed this to happen in the name of love and tolerance, that we're doing some kind of a good thing or being nice to somebody and not alienating them. Don's heard me tell this story. I had a grand sponsor, his name was Hugh Douglas. He's dead now, but he lived in California. And Hugh said that he saw something happen in AA that was disturbing to him, and it was the old-timers and the newcomers that were both doing this. And the old-timers, when someone said they were an addict, they'd say, get the hell out of here, you don't belong in this meeting. And the newcomers would say, oh, it's love and tolerance of all, and if you're here, you're in the right place, and et cetera, et cetera. And he said they were both doing the same thing, that essentially they were both lazy, that no one really wanted to take the person and in love and tolerance help them discover what their truth was and spend the time that it took to do that, And I honestly feel that if we don't stand up for this thing, we're going to be in big trouble. And so I'm not trying to beat a dead horse, but it's an important issue. Thanks.
We're going to go till about 11:15. Lou's got an announcement to make, I think, about that time. So with your continued patience, we will go to the next one. Or with your continued impatience, we'll go on to the next one. Problems of money, property, and authority may easily divert us, and do. from our primary spiritual aim, we think therefore that any considerable property of genuine use to AA should be separately incorporated and managed, thus dividing the material from the spiritual in AA group as such should never go into business secondary aids to AA, such as clubs or hospitals, which require much property or administration, ought to be incorporated and so set apart that if necessary they can be freely discarded by the groups. Hence, such facilities ought not use the AA name. Their management should be the sole responsibility of those people who financially support them. For clubs, AA managers are usually preferred, but hospitals, as well as other places of recuperation, ought to be well outside AA and medically supervised. While an AA group may cooperate with anyone, such cooperation ought never go so far as affiliation or endorsement, actual or implied. An AA group can bind itself to no one. And, of course, that happens every day, that we bind to everything. Affiliate, integrate, marry our first cousins. I'm probably the only one that ever saw that happen. We had a little controversy down in southern part of California and extended over into Arizona. It had to do with an outfit called the 24-hour groups that were ostensibly Alcoholics Anonymous, but they were a kind of a drying out. They had some kind of therapy thing that was going on there, and it had to do with physical punishment, actually. And it all went well until somebody died as a result of this experimentation. And they didn't know what to do with the body, so they put it in the dumpster. And it was behind the place. I mean, give me a break, go down the street or something. And then they were discovered, and so this whole thing got investigated, and Alcoholics Anonymous kind of got brought into it. And it was kind of a nasty, nasty affair, and it still goes on, but the point of it is that there's all kinds of good intentions out there, and a lot of people, a lot of organizations, a lot of societies have tried to gain respectability through something that I call coattailing, and I don't know whether that's a good word, but it's one I'll use. Coattailing Alcoholics Anonymous, too much to our chagrin. And it was asked one time to me, for example, why is it that we give up our steps and our traditions to these other entities? There's 211, I think, now, as it sits. I heard it said one time it's because we don't want them. And that sounds kind of cold, but it's a fact, because it takes us away from 5. They knew. Look, you don't have to go very far back in history to see that alcoholics gathered together for purposes other than sobriety tear each other apart. Washingtonian movement was an example, and even before that, the Rush movement, around 1700 in this country, was destroyed by the fact that we thought we could be all things to all people. And there's still that sentiment in Alcoholics Anonymous. And it's not just new people, and it's not just old-timers. It's across the board. And I suspect it was there in the beginning. And I suspect that that's the reason why they spent so much time with this thing. And I know in my personal life that I've had more trouble with the 3 P's, power, property, and prestige, in sobriety, than all the other things put together. And I think that it probably is a direct result of, whatever seems to plague the groups probably plaguing me too. Sometimes, I mentioned it earlier, I think there's a lot of pressure. There's a lot of forces at work, and I don't know how else to describe it except to use that word, that demand conformity to some nebulous moving yuppie target, or you got to be a joiner, and you got to get involved in this team. Take one for the team. I ain't a team player. I want to take one for the team. You take one for the team. It's your goddamn turn. I'll see how you take it. If you take it standing up, then I might consider it. I'll pray on it for a week. But I'm not, you know, and thank God, Alcoholics Anonymous membership doesn't depend on conformity. And I think more and more, as the more people we get in our society, and the more pressure there is to make more money, get more stuff, the old adage of the one who dies with the most toys wins almost becomes a fact of life. And I wonder sometimes if I know certainly as individuals we've all been involved in that more or less, although maybe we don't want to admit it. But as a fellowship, too, we get somehow the idea, and again, I go back to my responses that I got from the groups. How's your group doing? Oh, we got 14 meetings a week.